The Christmas tree in the Carter family living room cost more than most people's monthly rent. Simone had stopped noticing such things after 6 months of marriage to Matthew Carter. She'd learned to notice other things instead. The way his mother, Patricia, examined her clothing with the precision of someone appraising jewelry for flaws. The way his father, Robert, spoke past her rather than to her, as if her presence at family gatherings was decorative rather than meaningful. The way his sister, Claire, smiled with her mouth while her eyes calculated new ways to diminish her. Tonight's Christmas Eve dinner had been presented as an olive branch, a chance to start fresh after months of tension. The thorns became apparent the moment Simone arrived wearing a dress from Nordstrom rack rather than the boutiques Patricia preferred. How practical, Patricia had murmured, her fingers brushing Simone's sleeve with the same expression someone might use when encountering an unfamiliar insect. Matthew, darling, doesn't your firm offer some sort of clothing allowance for occasions like this? Matthew had laughed, actually laughed, before explaining that Simone preferred to be economical, in a tone that made frugality sound like a character defect rather than a choice. Simone's hand had moved instinctively to her water glass, gripping it to keep from responding. She'd learned that defending herself only gave them more ammunition. Silence, she'd discovered, was the only response they couldn't twist into evidence of her inadequacy. The dining room was a masterpiece of holiday excess. Crystal chandeliers refracted light into rainbow patterns across cream-colored walls. The table, an imported piece Patricia had mentioned cost a modest fortune, was set with china so delicate Simone feared breathing too hard near it. Candles and silver holders worth more than her car payment flickered between arrangements of white roses and winter greenery. Everything was warm, glowing, picture-perfect, and Simone had never felt colder in her life. "So, Simone," Robert said, cutting into his prime rib with the precision of a surgeon, "Matthew mentioned you've been handling the household budget. How's that going for you?" The question landed with the weight of an accusation. "It's going well," Simone replied, keeping her voice level and her eyes on her plate. "Is it?" Patricia's tone carried surprise that felt performative. "Because Matthew mentioned you've been asking for additional funds quite frequently. For necessities," he said. Claire set down her wine glass with a delicate clink. "Oh, Mother, don't embarrass her. I'm sure Simone is doing her best. Managing money is hard when you're not used to having much of it." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Simone felt Matthew shift beside her. She waited, counted 3 full seconds in her head, for him to intervene, to correct the record, to defend her against his sister's casual cruelty. He reached for his water instead. "Actually," Simone said, her voice carrying just enough edge to be noticed, "I've been managing quite well. The household account covers everything we need. Everything except the extras you keep requesting," Patricia said smoothly. "Matthew was just telling us this morning about some. What was it, darling? A prescription you needed?" Simone's jaw tightened. The morning's argument crashed back with perfect, painful clarity. Earlier that morning, the prescription notice had come through on her phone at 7:15 a.m., while Matthew was getting ready for his run. Simone had stared at the message from her doctor's office, heart sinking. "Reminder, your prescription for medication name is ready for pickup. Total cost with insurance, $45. It wasn't an emergency, not life or death, just something her doctor had recommended to manage the stress-induced migraines that had become more frequent over the past few months. Something that would make her daily life more bearable. She'd found Matthew in their bedroom, lacing up his running shoes. "Hey," she'd said, keeping her tone light. "I got a notification from the pharmacy. I need to pick up that prescription Dr. Williams ordered. It's $45. Matthew hadn't looked up. $45 for what? "The medication we discussed. For the migraines. Simone, we talked about this." He'd straightened, checking his reflection in the mirror. "You need to plan better. The household budget is for planned expenses. You can't just spring things on me." "It's not springing. Dr. Williams prescribed it 2 weeks ago. I told you then. And I said we'd discuss it when we reviewed the budget." He'd grabbed his phone and keys. "But you always do this. You wait until the last minute and then act like I'm being unreasonable for not having the money immediately available." Simone had felt something crack inside her chest. "Matthew, it's $45. You spent $300 on golf clubs last week." His expression had shifted into something she'd learned to recognize. The look that said she was being difficult, emotional, Unreasonable. That's different. That was from my personal account. The household budget is separate, and we agreed you'd manage it responsibly. He'd moved toward the door. If you can't handle planning expenses properly, maybe we need to restructure how this works. I'm not asking for permission to spend money, Simone had said quietly. I'm asking my husband to help me afford medication prescribed by my doctor. And I'm asking my wife to show some financial discipline. He'd paused at the door, his tone softening in that way that made his criticism sound like concern. Look, we'll talk about this later. But Simone, you have to understand, I can't just hand you money every time you decide you need something. That's not how partnerships work. He'd left her standing in their bedroom, prescription notifications still glowing on her phone screen, wondering when asking for basic medical care had become evidence of her inadequacy. Back at the table. It was a prescription, Simone said, her voice carefully neutral. For migraines. My doctor recommended it. Oh, medical things, Patricia said, waving her hand as if swatting away an irrelevant detail. Well, those are important, of course. Though I do think Matthew has a point about planning. When Robert and I were young, I always made sure to budget for medical expenses ahead of time. It's just good household management. Robert nodded. Discipline is important, especially in marriage. Sets the right foundation. Claire leaned forward, her smile sharp. Speaking of foundations, Simone, I've been meaning to ask. What are you making for the neighborhood potluck next week? I remember last time you brought that casserole. She said the word like it was something distasteful. Store-bought, wasn't it? It was homemade, Simone replied. Oh, was it? Claire's eyebrows rose with theatrical surprise. It just had that, budget feel to it. Nothing wrong with that, of course. Not everyone can afford the ingredients for proper entertaining. Matthew shifted in his seat. Simone turned to look at him directly, giving him one more chance. He was staring at his plate, jaw working like he was chewing words he wouldn't swallow. Budget cooking is an art form, really, Patricia continued. My mother always said you can tell a woman's background by what she serves at dinner parties. Not that there's anything wrong with humble origins. The assault was elegant. Surgical. Each comment delivered with enough plausible deniability that calling it out would make Simone look oversensitive. Simone's phone, resting face down beside her napkin, suddenly felt like it was burning through the table. Her fingers moved toward it. Matthew noticed. His eyes flicked to her hand, then back to his wine glass. She saw something cross his face. Concern, perhaps, but he said nothing. Simone, Patricia said, I hope you understand we're just trying to help. You're part of this family now, and we want you to succeed. But that requires adaptability. Understanding how things work in our world. Your world, Simone repeated softly. Well, yes, Matthew's world, which is now yours too. Patricia smiled. Though I suppose it must be quite an adjustment. Simone looked at Matthew one more time. Waited for him to prove the man she'd married was still there. He cleared his throat. Mother, maybe we should. Should what, darling? Patricia's eyes sharpened. Should stop helping your wife understand the standards expected of her. Matthew's mouth closed. Something inside Simone crystallized. She stood smoothly. Excuse me. I need to make a phone call. During dinner? Patricia's eyebrows rose. That's terribly rude. I'll only be a moment. She walked out, phone in hand, leaving behind the warm glow of Christmas lights and the cold reality of a family that had mistaken her patience for powerlessness. Behind her, Claire's voice. Well, that was dramatic. Matthew, your wife is awfully sensitive, isn't she? Simone's fingers found the contact she'd avoided for 2 years. Her father answered immediately. Simone, what's wrong? Dad, she said, her voice steady. I need you to activate the protocols. All of them. A pause. Are you safe? Physically, yes. But I need them to understand. Consider it done. 20 minutes. She returned to the table, setting her phone beside her plate. Everything all right? Patricia asked. Perfect, Simone replied. Just making sure some important matters were handled. She checked the time. 18 minutes. Before dessert was served, Christmas would be canceled, not by weather, but by truth. The first time Simone noticed the shift, she'd convinced herself she was imagining things. It was 3 months after their wedding. A beautiful ceremony her father had paid for despite Matthew's parents' thinly veiled suggestions that they could help with something more appropriate to our circle. Simone had been reviewing their joint account statements when she noticed her name was no longer listed as primary. Oh, that. Matthew had said when she asked, barely looking up from his laptop. I consolidated our accounts for better management. Makes tracking easier. Don't worry. You still have full access. And she had. The debit card worked. She could see the balance. Everything seemed fine. Except it wasn't primary access anymore. It was granted access. The distinction felt small enough to ignore. She'd ignored it. In their early marriage, decisions had been shared. Friday nights, they'd sit together with wine and laptops, reviewing finances, planning purchases, discussing goals. Matthew had seemed to value her input then. He'd asked her opinion on investments, consulted her about major expenses, made her feel like an equal partner in building their life together. What do you think about this retirement fund? He'd asked during their second month of marriage, genuinely interested. The expense ratio seems high, she'd replied. What about this index fund instead? He'd smiled, impressed. That's actually brilliant. See, this is why I married someone smart. Those moments had felt real, like she mattered beyond just being his wife. The erosion happened so gradually, she couldn't identify when partnership became permission-seeking. First, the Friday night finance meetings became Matthew's solo reviews. You're tired from work, he'd say. Let me handle the boring money stuff. Just relax. It had seemed considerate. Then her name disappeared from certain accounts entirely. These are investment vehicles, Matthew explained. They need a primary holder for tax purposes. You're still the beneficiary. It's just cleaner this way. She'd been busy with her graphic design work then. Trusted him. Believed that marriage meant not sweating the small details. By month 5, the household budget had appeared. A separate account Matthew funded weekly with what he deemed appropriate for groceries, utilities, and personal expenses. This way you don't have to worry about overdrafting, he'd said, presenting it like a gift. You've got your set amount, and I handle everything else. Less stress for you. Less stress. That's how he'd framed it. What it actually meant was less access, less visibility, less power. Simone had noticed but told herself she was being paranoid. Matthew loved her. He was trying to help. She was being ungrateful, suspicious, the kind of wife who created problems where none existed. His family had reinforced the arrangement with enthusiastic approval. Matthew's so responsible. Patricia had gushed during a Sunday brunch. Robert did the same thing for me when we married. Men just have a better head for finances. It's biological, really. It lets you focus on what matters, Claire had added. Home. Family. The soft skills women excel at. The message was clear. Questioning Matthew's financial control was questioning his masculinity, his capability, his role as provider and protector. And Simone wanted peace. Wanted to believe that being a good wife meant trusting her husband to lead. That patience and flexibility were virtues, not weaknesses. You're different than you used to be, her best friend Tasha had observed 6 months into the marriage, concern evident in her voice. You used to make decisions without checking with anyone. Now you're asking Matthew about everything. That's called being married, Simone had replied, defensive. It's called partnership. Partnership means he asks you too. Tasha had said quietly. Does he? Simone hadn't answered because the truth was uncomfortable. No, Matthew didn't ask her anymore. He informed her, decided for them, moved money and made plans and restructured their entire financial life while telling her it was for her benefit. The final shift came at month 7, when Matthew suggested she quit her graphic design work. You're stressed, he'd said, massaging her shoulders after a particularly demanding project deadline. Always worried about clients, deadlines, invoicing. What if you took a break? Focused on our home. On yourself. I like working, she'd protested weakly. I know, but I make enough for both of us. You don't need to work. He'd kissed the top of her head. Let me take care of you. It had sounded loving. Protective. Like he was offering her freedom rather than dependence. She'd quit 3 weeks later. Without her income, the household budget became her only access to money. Matthew's generosity, or lack thereof, determined what she could afford, where she could go, what she could do. Why do you need $200? He'd asked when she wanted to take a weekend painting class. It's something I'd enjoy. But we're trying to save for the house down payment. Maybe next quarter. Next quarter became next year became, we'll see. The painting class was never mentioned again. Simone had told herself this was normal. That all couples had to make sacrifices. That Matthew's career demanded focus, and supporting him was her role now. His family made sure she believed it. You're so lucky, Patricia had said during one of their monthly lunches that felt increasingly like performance reviews. Matthew works so hard to provide for you. Robert says he's invaluable at the firm. He is, Simone had agreed, because what else could she say? It must be nice not having to worry about money, Claire had added, her smile sharp. Just enjoying the lifestyle without the stress of earning it. The implication was clear. Simone was decorative, maintained, a dependent rather than a partner. And somewhere along the way, she'd started believing it herself, started asking permission for small purchases, started justifying her needs, started feeling guilty for wanting things that cost money she technically had access to, but somehow couldn't claim without approval. The migraines had started around month 8. Stress-induced, her doctor said. Possibly tension-related. Had anything changed recently in her life? Everything, Simone had thought. But what she'd said was, not really. Just normal marriage adjustment. Dr. Williams had prescribed medication, suggested stress management techniques, recommended therapy if the headaches persisted. Simone had nodded, thanked her, and then asked Matthew for $45 to fill the prescription. He'd refused. And that refusal, that small, cruel denial of basic medical care, had finally cracked through the careful justifications she'd built around his behavior. This wasn't partnership. This was control. Control disguised as care, as protection, as traditional marriage values. Control that had convinced her over 7 months that she was the problem, that her expectations were unreasonable, that asking for basic autonomy was somehow betraying her vows. Matthew's family had been essential to the process. Every comment about her background, every suggestion that she was lucky to have married into stability, every reminder that women like her, black women from working-class families, should be grateful for men like Matthew who chose them despite their inadequacies. They treated her as temporary from the beginning, someone who'd eventually be replaced by a wife who better fit their image, someone who understood her place. And Matthew had let them. Worse, he'd participated. Every time he'd laughed at their jokes, every time he'd stayed silent during their critiques, every time he'd chosen their approval over her dignity, he'd reinforced that Simone Carter née Williams was less than, other than, acceptable only to the extent she remained compliant and grateful. The truly insidious part was how reasonable it had all seemed while happening. Budget talks that were actually unilateral decisions presented as discussions. Financial restructuring that stripped her access while claiming to simplify. A household allowance that sounded generous until she needed anything beyond basic survival. Control doesn't announce itself, Simone realized now, sitting at the Christmas table with 17 minutes until everything changed. Control normalizes itself, makes you believe you're choosing limitations freely, convinces you that questioning it makes you difficult, ungrateful, unsuited for partnership. She'd spent 7 months learning to be small, to need less, to ask for nothing. 7 months of watching the man she'd married transform from partner to manager, from husband to handler. 7 months of his family measuring her worth by how little trouble she caused. And it had worked, until it didn't. Until $45 for medication became the number too small to ignore. The refusal too cruel to rationalize. The moment too clear to misinterpret. Simone checked her phone. 16 minutes. Across the table, Patricia was describing their upcoming New Year's vacation to Aspen. The one funded by accounts that were about to freeze. The trip that would be canceled in. She checked again, 15 minutes and 40 seconds. Matthew caught her looking at her phone. Everything okay? She met his eyes. Saw the man she'd married buried under the man his family had always wanted him to be. Everything's fine, she said. Just keeping track of time. Because in 15 minutes, the marriage that had quietly shifted from partnership to control would shift again. Only this time, the power would flow in a different direction. The seating arrangement should have been Simone's first clue. At the Carter family Christmas table, Patricia sat at the head, Robert at the foot. Matthew was positioned to his father's right, the seat of honor, the heir apparent. Claire sat beside their mother, perfectly positioned to participate in Patricia's commentary. And Simone? Simone sat between Matthew and the empty chair where the breadbasket rested. Not quite excluded, not quite included. The placement was precise enough to seem accidental and deliberate enough to send a message. She was peripheral. Auxiliary. Someone who could be easily talked around, talked over, or simply not talked to at all. The conversations flowed around her like water around a stone. Robert, Tell Matthew about the Morrison account, Patricia said, ignoring Simone entirely despite addressing the men on either side of her. Robert launched into business talk, mergers, acquisitions, strategic positioning. Matthew leaned forward, engaged, asking intelligent questions that his father answered with obvious pride. Simone might as well have been furniture. She'd noticed this pattern before at family gatherings. The way discussions naturally excluded her. Topics she couldn't contribute to because she lacked context. Business dealings she wasn't privy to. Social connections she wasn't part of. Family history she hadn't lived. At first, she tried to participate. Asked questions. Offered observations. That's an interesting strategy, she'd said once during a discussion about market positioning. Patricia had smiled. How sweet. Matthew, your wife is trying to understand business. The condescension had been wrapped in such gentle affection that objecting would have made Simone look oversensitive. She'd stopped trying to participate after that. Now she listened, observed, noted the patterns she'd been too hopeful to see clearly before. The way Claire's stories always positioned Simone as the outsider. Remember when we vacationed in Martha's Vineyard? Oh, Simone, you weren't there yet. Family tradition. You probably wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway. Very old money, very exclusive. The way Patricia's questions carried assumptions. Simone, dear, where did you say your family typically spends the holidays? I imagine it's quite different from our traditions. The way Robert spoke about Simone in third person even when she was present. Matthew's wife is adjusting well, considering the culture shock. Culture shock. As if marrying Matthew meant emigrating to a foreign country. Tonight's microaggressions were building to something. Simone could feel it in the deliberate pacing, the calculated escalation. Simone, Patricia said suddenly, her voice cutting through the business discussion. Matthew mentioned you've been experiencing health issues. Migraines, was it? The table's attention swiveled to her. Yes, Simone replied carefully. Stress-induced, according to my doctor. Stress from what? Claire asked, her tone suggesting confusion. You don't work anymore. What could possibly be stressful about managing a household? The implication landed like a slap. If Simone was stressed, it must be her own inadequacy. Her inability to handle the easy life Matthew provided. Modern life is stressful for everyone, Simone said evenly. Is it though? Patricia tilted her head. I've always found that stress is often a matter of perspective. Learning to be grateful for what you have rather than anxious about what you lack. I am grateful. Of course you are, Patricia interrupted smoothly. But gratitude and entitlement can look similar from the outside. Asking for things you haven't earned. Expecting support without contribution. Simone's jaw tightened. I contribute to this marriage. Do you? Robert's question was mild but devastating. How exactly? Matthew supports you financially. His career provides your lifestyle. What is it you're contributing that's causing all this stress? Matthew said nothing. Simone looked at him directly, willing him to intervene. To tell his father that her contributions mattered. That partnership wasn't measured in paychecks. Matthew reached for his wine glass instead. The silence was damning. I think, Claire said into the quiet, her voice dripping with false sympathy. What we're all trying to understand is why you seem so unhappy. You married into a wonderful family. You live in a beautiful home. You don't have to work. Most women would be thrilled. Most women. The ones who knew their place. The ones who expressed gratitude through silence. I'm not unhappy, Simone said, though the lie tasted bitter. Really? Patricia's eyebrows rose. Because from where I sit, you seem quite discontent. The migraines. The tension. The constant need for reassurance that you're doing things correctly. I don't need reassurance. Don't you? Patricia leaned forward slightly. Matthew tells me you're always asking questions. Always needing guidance. Always uncertain about how to handle simple social situations. Simone's blood ran cold. Matthew had been reporting her behavior to his mother, framing her attempts at inclusion as evidence of inadequacy. She turned to look at him fully. You told your mother I need guidance? Matthew shifted uncomfortably. That's not, Mom, I didn't say it like that. Didn't you? Patricia's voice was gentle. Reasonable. You said Simone struggles with our social expectations. That she often misunderstands the tone of family interactions. Because you're deliberately cruel, Simone said quietly. The table went silent. Claire gasped theatrically. Excuse me. You're cruel, Simone repeated, her voice steady. Every comment about my background. Every joke about my cooking. Every reminder that I'm different, that I don't belong, that I should be grateful you tolerate me. It's deliberate, it's calculated, and it's designed to make me believe I'm the problem. Patricia's expression didn't change. Simone, you're being paranoid. Am I? Because this entire dinner feels like a test. The seating, the topics, the questions designed to exclude me or highlight my inadequacy. Even the timing, Christmas Eve, when I'm supposed to be grateful and gracious and unwilling to make a scene. You're making a scene right now, Robert observed. Because you've been making one all evening. Simone's voice rose slightly before she pulled it back under control. This was never about reconciliation. This was about measuring how much I'd tolerate, how small I'd make myself, whether I'd finally break or keep absorbing your contempt with a smile. Matthew finally spoke. Simone, you're overreacting. There it was. The word that had defined their entire marriage. Overreacting when she questioned financial decisions. Overreacting when she asked to be defended. Overreacting when she wanted basic respect from his family. No, Simone said, looking at each of them in turn. I'm finally reacting appropriately. She stood calmly, her chair sliding back without sound. Where are you going? Patricia asked, irritation creeping into her voice. To make a phone call. During Christmas dinner? That's incredibly rude. Simone smiled. A real smile, the kind that came from clarity rather than politeness. No more rude than spending the evening reminding me I don't belong here. She walked away from the table, phone in hand, hearing Claire's voice behind her. Well, I suppose we know where she stands. She'll apologize later, Matthew said, and Simone heard the certainty in his voice. The assumption that she'd come back chastened. That this little rebellion would end like all the others, with her compliance. He had no idea what was about to happen. None of them did. Simone had finally understood something crucial. This dinner wasn't about family. It was about power, about reinforcing hierarchy, about teaching her that questioning them had consequences. What they'd failed to consider was that power could shift, and consequences could flow both ways. She checked her phone. 12 minutes. 12 minutes until the family that treated her as temporary discovered just how permanent her authority actually was. 2 years earlier, before the wedding, Simone had sat in her father's study reviewing paperwork that would shape her entire future. I know you want independence, Marcus Williams had said, sliding documents across his mahogany desk. I respect that. But Simone, you're my only daughter. Let me protect you the only way I can. Dad, I love Matthew. He's not. I'm sure he's wonderful, her father interrupted gently. I'm sure he loves you. But love and legal protection aren't mutually exclusive. Humor me. The documents had been complex. Trusts, financial instruments, carefully structured accounts that appeared straightforward but contained layers of authority and control. The joint accounts will require your authorization for any major changes, her father had explained. Matthew can make day-to-day transactions, but restructuring, large withdrawals, account closures, those need your explicit approval. He'll think I don't trust him. Then frame it as standard legal protection. Wealthy families do this all the time. Marcus had met her eyes seriously. Simone, if he loves you, he'll understand. If he refuses, that tells you something important. Matthew hadn't refused. He'd barely paid attention. Just standard prenup stuff, right? He'd asked, skimming the documents during their pre-wedding legal review. Making sure we're both protected? Exactly, Simone had said, relief flooding through her. My father insists. Makes sense. His daughter marrying someone new? Of course he wants safeguards. Matthew had signed without reading the details, trusting that Simone's explanation was complete. It wasn't. The documents did far more than protect assets. They created structures where Simone held ultimate authority over accounts Matthew assumed he controlled. Investment vehicles that listed him as manager, but her as primary authority. Business lines of credit that required her family's financial institution as custodian, meaning her father's approval for continuance. Robert Carter's company had financing through these instruments. Matthew's personal investment accounts were tied to trusts Simone could freeze. Even the vacation properties Patricia loved so much were secured through vehicles that required annual reauthorization. Annual reauthorization that was coming due. That Matthew's family had never bothered to read the fine print on. Simone had hoped she'd never need to use these protections. Had believed that love would be enough. That Matthew would prove his family wrong about their assumptions. that she'd build a marriage based on partnership rather than power dynamics. For 2 years, she'd kept these structures invisible, never mentioned them, never threatened with them, never even hinted that she held more authority than Matthew realized. But she'd also never forgotten they existed. If things get bad, her father had said during their last conversation before the wedding, if you ever need this power. I won't need it, Simone had insisted. Matthew's different from his family. Marcus had smiled sadly, like he knew something she didn't. I hope you're right, sweetheart. But if you're not, remember, you're never powerless. You just have to decide when to stop pretending you are. Now, standing in the Carter family hallway with her phone in her hand and 11 minutes until activation, Simone understood what her father had been trying to tell her. Power unused looks like powerlessness. Authority unexercised appears like submission. She'd spent 2 years being the wife Matthew wanted, flexible, understanding, willing to accommodate his family's cruelty and his financial control. She'd postponed using her power, waiting for him to choose her, to defend her, to prove that the documents she'd signed were unnecessary precautions rather than essential protections. He'd never chosen her. Not once. Not when his family mocked her cooking. Not when they questioned her background. Not when they treated her like a temporary fixture in their family portrait. Not even when he denied her $45 for medication prescribed by her doctor. Simone looked at her phone, at the contact labeled Dad, emergency only. This qualified. She'd made the call, activated the protocols, set in motion mechanisms that Matthew had never bothered to understand despite signing authorization for them. In 10 minutes, every assumption his family held about power and control would shatter. The joint accounts Matthew assumed he managed, frozen pending Simone's review. The investment portfolios he'd restructured without her input, locked until she provided explicit written authorization. Robert's business line of credit, suspended for the annual risk assessment that Simone's family bank was contractually obligated to perform, and that required Simone's approval to renew. Patricia's vacation properties, held in trusts that required spousal consent for continued access. Even Claire's trust fund, the one she'd used to mock Simone's budget cooking, was tied to family instruments that required Marcus Williams' institutional approval. All of it, every piece of financial security they'd weaponized against her, depended on structures they'd never bothered to read. Structures Simone had insisted on. Structures Matthew had signed. Structures that were about to teach them something essential about underestimating quiet black women who knew exactly what they were signing, and exactly what their husbands were too arrogant to read. Simone had never wanted to be this person. The wife who held power in reserve, who documented everything, who prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. But Matthew's family had made preparation necessary, and Matthew's silence had made activation inevitable. She checked the time. 9 minutes. Inside the dining room, she could hear them laughing, probably about her dramatic exit, probably placing bets on when she'd return apologetically. They had no idea. Simone took a deep breath, centered herself, and walked back toward the table. Not because she was surrendering, because she wanted to see their faces when Christmas stopped. Simone returned to her seat with 8 minutes remaining. Feeling better? Patricia asked, her tone suggesting Simone had been throwing a tantrum rather than making a phone call that would dismantle their entire financial infrastructure. Much better, Simone replied, setting her phone face down beside her untouched dessert plate. Thank you for your patience. Matthew glanced at her, relief evident. She'd come back. She'd calmed down. Everything would return to normal, his version of normal, where she absorbed his family's cruelty and asked for nothing in return. Shall we move on to dessert? Patricia gestured toward the kitchen. I had it catered from that bakery Claire recommended. Terribly expensive, but worth it for Christmas. Sounds lovely, Simone said, checking her phone discreetly. 7 minutes. Across the city, in the executive offices of Williams Financial Group, Marcus Williams was already making calls, activating protocols, sending authorizations to systems managers who'd been briefed on this possibility 2 years ago and told to execute immediately if the order ever came. Annual risk assessment on the Carter portfolio, he'd be saying. Effective immediately. Freeze all associated accounts pending review. The Carter family line of credit needs spousal authorization renewal. Another call would clarify. That authorization has been formally withdrawn. Suspend the credit line. Investment accounts under Matthew Carter require primary holder approval for continued management. That approval is under review. Lock the accounts. One by one, systems that had run automatically for years would grind to a halt, waiting for authorization that wouldn't come. At the dinner table, Claire was describing her New Year's plans. We're flying to Aspen on the 28th. I booked the most amazing suite. Her phone buzzed. Then Patricia's. Then Robert's. Then Matthew's. The synchronized notifications created a discordant chorus that stopped conversation mid-sentence. Claire looked at her screen and frowned. That's weird. My credit card just declined. Declined? Patricia pulled out her phone, her expression shifting from confusion to concern. I'm getting alerts about account freezes. This must be some kind of error. Robert was already calling his bank, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, this is Robert Carter. I'm receiving notifications about suspended accounts. What do you mean pending review? We've banked with you for 20 years. Matthew's face had gone pale. He was scrolling through multiple alerts, his finger moving faster and faster. The investment accounts. The business line. Everything's frozen. Simone sat perfectly still, watching. This has to be a mistake, Claire said, trying her card again on her phone. A system glitch or something. All of our accounts at the same time? Patricia's voice was rising. Robert, what are they saying? Robert's face had darkened. They're saying it's an annual risk assessment. That all associated accounts require authorization from the primary holder before they can be reactivated. Well, that's you, Patricia said. Give them authorization. I'm not the primary holder. Robert's voice was deadly quiet. Apparently, the accounts are structured through Williams Financial Group. They're saying I need spousal consent to renew the credit instruments. Every eye at the table turned to Simone. She took a sip of her water, saying nothing. Matthew's phone rang. He answered it, listened for 30 seconds, then slowly lowered the phone. That was my bank. They're saying the joint accounts need your explicit written authorization to restore access. Simone, what's happening? Exactly what I told them to do, Simone said calmly. The silence was absolute. You told them, Matthew's voice cracked. You can't just freeze our accounts. They're not our accounts, Matthew. They're mine. You signed authorization structures 2 years ago that gave me primary control. You just never bothered to read what you were signing. Patricia stood abruptly. This is absurd. You're his wife. You can't just. I can, Simone interrupted, her voice level. And I did. Claire's hands were shaking. My trust fund. My New York apartment deposit. Everything's frozen. Simone, you have to fix this. I don't have to do anything. Robert's face had gone from dark to crimson. Young lady, you don't understand what you've done. That business line funds my company. I have payroll obligations. Contracts. If you think you can use some legal technicality too. It's not a technicality, Simone said. It's the legal structure your son signed. The one your family never questioned because you assumed I was too powerless or too grateful to ever use it. Matthew stood, his chair scraping loudly. Simone, we need to talk. Privately. No. We're done talking privately. Every private conversation we've had has ended with you choosing their approval over my dignity. So no. Whatever you need to say, you can say it here. You're being unreasonable. Am I? Simone's voice remained calm, but steel had entered it. I asked you for $45 this morning. For medication prescribed by my doctor. You refused. You called me irresponsible. You suggested I needed to learn financial discipline. That's different. You spent $300 on golf clubs last week without a second thought. But $45 for my health was too much. That's not different, Matthew. That's cruelty disguised as responsibility. Patricia tried to regain control. Simone, you're upset. We understand. But this is not the way to handle family disagreements. If you'll just authorize the accounts, we can sit down and discuss. There's nothing to discuss. Simone stood now, and despite being the shortest person in the room, she commanded the space. You've spent months treating me like I should be grateful you tolerate me. Like my background made me less than. Like asking for basic respect was demanding too much. We never said, Claire started. You said it every time you mocked my cooking. Every time you questioned my worthiness. Every time you reminded me I was different, other, temporary. Simone looked at each of them. And Matthew let you. Worse, he participated. I was trying to keep the peace, Matthew said desperately. By sacrificing me. That's not peace, Matthew. That's complicity. Robert's voice thundered. You will restore those accounts immediately, or so help me. Or what? Simone turned to face him fully. You'll what, Robert? Sue me? For exercising legal authority I've held for 2 years? Authority your son signed over to me? Please, try it. My father's lawyers would destroy you. The mention of her father made Patricia's eyes narrow. Your father? This is about him, isn't it? He put you up to this. Probably been planning it all along. My father gave me protection I prayed I'd never need, Simone said. But you made it necessary. Every comment, every microaggression, every moment you made clear I wasn't family, just someone Matthew married who you had to tolerate. Claire was crying now, mascara running. Simone, please. The Aspen trip. My apartment deposit. I can't lose that. Please, I'm sorry for anything I said. Are you? Simone asked quietly. Are you sorry you said it? Or sorry it has consequences? Matthew moved toward her. Simone, I'm begging you. Tell me what you want. Tell me how to fix this. I want you to understand what you've done. What you've been doing for months. I understand. Do you? Do you understand that denying me medication while spending freely on yourself is financial abuse? That your family's treatment of me is emotional abuse? That your silence in the face of their cruelty is betrayal? Matthew's face crumpled. I thought. You thought I'd keep taking it. That I'd stay small and grateful and quiet forever. Simone's voice was soft, but carried the weight of months of suppressed pain. You were wrong. Robert was calling someone else now, voice hard. I don't care what the system says. I need those accounts restored. Get me your supervisor. He paused, listening. Then his face went slack. What do you mean she's within her rights? I'm the account holder. Another pause. I see. He lowered the phone slowly. They can't override her, he said to Patricia, and for the first time, Simone heard fear in his voice. The legal structure is airtight. Everything requires her authorization. Then we'll sue, Patricia said. We'll lose, Robert interrupted. I just spoke to our attorney. Briefly, these documents were drafted by one of the best financial law firms in the country. If we challenge them, we'll spend hundreds of thousands in legal fees just to have a judge tell us what we're hearing now. She has full legal authority. The family was fracturing. Simone could see it happening in real time. Claire sank into her chair, still crying. My apartment. The deposit was $20,000. If I lose it. Patricia's composure was cracking. Simone, please. Be reasonable. We're family. Family doesn't do this to each other. You're right, Simone said. Family doesn't. But you've spent months making it clear I'm not family. I'm an outsider. Someone temporary. Someone who should be grateful and quiet and small. We'll make it right, Patricia said, desperation creeping into her voice. We'll apologize. We'll treat you better. Just please, restore the accounts. Apologize for what, specifically? Patricia's mouth opened and closed. She couldn't name it. Couldn't identify what exactly she'd done wrong, because to do so would mean admitting she'd done it deliberately. Matthew stepped forward again. Simone, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tell me what you need. I need you to understand. Really understand. Not just apologize to make this go away. I do understand. Then tell me what you did wrong. Matthew looked helpless. I didn't defend you. I didn't stand up to my family. I controlled the money in ways that weren't fair. Keep going. I made you feel small. I made you feel like your needs didn't matter. I refused you medication while spending freely on myself. His voice was breaking now. I chose their approval over your dignity. Over and over. I chose wrong. It was more than he'd said in months. But Simone waited, watching to see if understanding would follow words. Claire stood suddenly, moving towards Simone. Please. I'm sorry. Really sorry. The things I said, about your cooking, your background, they were cruel. I was cruel. Please, just fix this. Why were you cruel? Simone asked. I don't know. Yes, you do. Claire's face twisted. Because Mother taught me to be. Because that's how we treat people who aren't. She stopped. Who aren't what? Simone pressed. Who aren't like us? Claire whispered. God, that's awful. That's so awful. Patricia stood frozen, her perfect composure completely shattered. Robert had sunk into his chair, phone limp in his hand. And Matthew dropped to his knees. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. Literally fell to his knees on the expensive hardwood floor of his parents' dining room, hands clasped, looking up at his wife with desperation in his eyes. Please, he said. Simone, please. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, complete financial transparency. Whatever you need. Just please, don't destroy everything over this. Over this. Simone's voice went cold. Over months of abuse. Over your family's cruelty and your silence? That's not this, Matthew. That's our marriage. Claire dropped to her knees too. Then Patricia, her elegant dress pooling around her. Even Robert, finally, lowered himself from his chair to kneel on the floor. The entire Carter family, kneeling before the woman they'd spent months dismissing as inferior. Simone stood above them, looking down at people who'd held all the social power, all the family authority, all the assumed superiority, now begging for mercy they'd never shown her. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just profound exhaustion at how completely unnecessary this all was. How easily it could have been avoided if they'd simply treated her with basic respect. Sit, she said quietly. All of you, sit and listen. They scrambled to their feet and into chairs with a gracelessness that would have been comical if the situation weren't so devastating. Simone remained standing, centered, calm. She didn't pace, didn't gesture dramatically, didn't raise her voice. When she spoke, it was with the measured clarity of someone who'd spent months finding words for pain they'd been forced to swallow. I'm not doing this to hurt you, she began. I'm not doing this for revenge or to prove a point or to destroy your family. I'm doing this because this is where respect begins. Patricia opened her mouth. Simone held up one hand. You don't speak yet. You listen. Patricia closed her mouth. Simone continued. For 7 months, I have lived in a marriage that became progressively more controlling. Matthew, you restructured our entire financial life without my input. You removed my access to accounts. You created a household budget that made me ask permission for basic needs. You framed all of this as helping me, as reducing my stress, as protecting me from financial complexity. Matthew's face was wet with tears. I said, listen. Simone's voice remained level. What you were actually doing was financial abuse, making me dependent, ensuring I needed your approval for everything, creating a dynamic where my autonomy disappeared so gradually I almost didn't notice it happening. She turned to Patricia. And you reinforced it. Every comment about how Matthew provides for me, every suggestion that I should be grateful, every reminder that he handles money better. You taught your son that controlling his wife financially was appropriate, expected, the mark of a successful marriage. Patricia looked down at her hands. The money was just the mechanism, Simone continued. The real abuse was making me believe I was the problem, that asking for medication was demanding too much, that defending myself against your cruelty was being oversensitive, that expecting my husband to stand beside me was unreasonable. She looked at Claire. You mock my cooking, my background, my worthiness to be in this family. And you did it deliberately, not because you believed I was inferior, but because you enjoyed making me feel inferior, because putting me down made you feel elevated. Claire was crying again, but silently now. And Matthew. Simone's voice softened slightly. You sat there, 3 feet away, watching your family diminish me, hearing them question my worth. And you said nothing. You chose their approval over my dignity every single time. I was trying to keep the peace, Matthew whispered. Peace at what cost? My sense of worth? My autonomy? My health? Simone shook her head. That's not peace, Matthew. That's silencing. And silence in the face of cruelty is its own form of cruelty. The room was absolutely quiet except for Claire's soft crying. Tonight was supposed to be different, Simone said. I came here with news that would have changed our entire life. News about financial security that would have made your father's business expansion possible, Patricia's vacation properties affordable, Claire's apartment a non-issue. She paused, letting that sink in. I was going to share it, celebrate it with you, use it to build something better for all of us. Her voice hardened. But instead, you used tonight to test me, to see how much more I'd tolerate, to measure my worthiness by how small I'd make myself. Robert finally spoke, his voice hoarse. We didn't mean. Yes, you did. That's what makes this so painful. You meant every word, every joke, every comment. You believed I was less than you, that my background made me inferior, that Matthew married down, and I should spend my life grateful he chose me. She let the truth settle. So here's what happens now, Simone said. The accounts remain frozen until the following conditions are met. Matthew leaned forward desperately. Anything. Name it. First, complete financial transparency. Every account, every investment, every expense. I see everything. I have equal access to everything. No more household budgets. No more asking permission. Partnership or nothing. Done, Matthew said immediately. Second, family therapy. You and me, Matthew. An individual therapy for you to understand how you enabled this. Yes, absolutely. Third, apologies. Real ones. Not, I'm sorry you felt hurt, or I didn't mean it that way. Apologies that name what you did and why it was wrong. From each of you. Patricia swallowed hard but nodded. Fourth, your family treats me with respect. Not tolerance. Not grudging acceptance. Respect. That means no more comments about my background. No more jokes at my expense. No more tests of my worthiness. I am Matthew's wife. That makes me family. Period. Claire wiped her eyes. Okay. Yes. I swear. Fifth, this changes permanently. Not just until the accounts unfreeze. Not just until Christmas is over. This is how our relationship works from now on. Matthew, if you ever deny me access to money again, for any reason, I walk. If your family ever treats me this way again, I walk. If you ever choose their approval over my dignity again, I walk. Matthew's voice was broken. I understand. Do you? Simone leaned forward slightly. Because I need you to understand something crucial. I didn't need you to protect me tonight. I never needed you to protect me. I needed you to stand beside me. To be my partner. To value me enough to say stop when your family was cruel. She straightened. I have power, Matthew. I've always had it. I chose not to use it because I wanted a marriage based on love, not leverage. But you mistook that choice for powerlessness. You thought my patience was weakness. You were wrong. I see that now, Matthew whispered. I hope so. Because mercy without accountability is just permission to do it again. I'm offering you mercy. All of you. But it comes with requirements. Simone pulled out her phone. I'm going to make a call now. I'm going to have my father begin the process of unfreezing accounts. But understand, this is conditional. The moment any of you violate these terms, everything stops again. And next time, it won't restart. Patricia found her voice. We understand. Do you? Do you understand that the woman you've spent months dismissing had the power to destroy your entire financial infrastructure with one phone call? That the quiet, grateful wife you thought you knew was actually protecting herself every step of the way? Yes, Patricia said quietly. We understand. Simone looked at each of them, saw genuine fear mixed with the beginnings of genuine understanding. I don't want to be your enemy, she said. I want to be family. But family means mutual respect. It means my voice matters as much as yours. It means Matthew stands beside me, not behind his parents' approval. She paused at the dining room entrance. Christmas isn't canceled, she said. But it's different now. The old dynamic, where I made myself small so you could feel big, that's done. From now on, we either build something real, or we stop pretending. She walked toward the quiet room where she'd made the first call, leaving them to sit with the weight of what she'd said. Behind her, she heard Matthew's broken voice. What have I done? God, what have I done? And Claire, quietly, we all did it. We all let it happen. Simone made the call to her father. How'd it go? Marcus asked. They're listening now. Good. Want me to unfreeze everything? Partially. Restore Matthew's personal account and the household expenses. Leave the business lines and investment accounts under review for another week. They need to understand this is real. Done. Simone, I'm proud of you. Thanks, Dad. I'm going home. My real home. Not here. You need anything? Just time to figure out if my marriage is salvageable. She ended the call and returned to the dining room one last time. Matthew, she said, get your coat. You're coming with me. Where? To our house. We need to talk. Really talk. Without your family present. Matthew stood immediately. Okay. Yes. Simone looked at Patricia, Robert, and Claire. Your accounts will be partially restored by morning. The rest depends on whether you meant what you said tonight. She turned and walked out, Matthew following behind her like a man who'd just realized he'd been living in a house of cards that his wife had been holding up all along. They drove in silence. Matthew in the passenger seat of their car, Simone behind the wheel. A reversal of their normal dynamic that felt symbolic of everything that had shifted tonight. He kept opening his mouth to speak, then closing it, unable to find words adequate to the magnitude of what had happened. Simone let the silence hold. Their house was dark when they arrived. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and turned on the lights. The Christmas tree they'd decorated together 3 weeks ago stood in the corner, lights twinkling cheerfully, utterly incongruous with the weight of the evening. Sit, Simone said, gesturing to the couch. Matthew sat. Simone remained standing for a moment, then lowered herself into the chair opposite him, not beside him. The physical distance matched the emotional gap that had been growing for months. "I need you to understand something," she said. "And I need you to really hear it, not just wait for your turn to apologize." "I'm listening," Matthew said, his voice raw. "You've been abusing me." The word hit him visibly. He flinched. "Simone, I never hit you. I know. Abuse doesn't require violence. It just requires systematic control designed to make someone dependent and powerless." She leaned forward. "You controlled our money. You decided what I could spend. You framed my needs as excessive while spending freely on yourself. You made me ask permission like a child asking for allowance. I was trying to help. No, you were trying to control. And you convinced yourself it was help because that's what abuse does. It disguises itself as care." Matthew's face was pale. "I didn't see it that way." "I know you didn't. That's what makes it so insidious. You genuinely believed you were being a good husband, a responsible provider, a man who was protecting his wife from financial stress." Simone's voice was steady but filled with pain. "But what you were actually doing was making me invisible, making my needs negotiable, making my autonomy something I had to earn rather than something I possessed inherently. I'm so sorry. I need more than sorry, Matthew. I need you to understand how you got here. Because if you don't understand, you'll just find new ways to do the same thing." Matthew nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Your family taught you that controlling women is love," Simone said. "Your father controls your mother's access to money. Your mother controls the social dynamics. They taught you that power flows one direction, from husband to wife, from established family to newcomer, from white to black. That's not. Yes, it is. It's exactly that. And you absorbed it so completely you didn't even recognize it as control. You thought it was normal, traditional, the way successful marriages work." She stood, pacing now. "Your mother spent months teaching you that my background made me less than, that I should be grateful, that questioning your authority was overstepping. And you believed her because believing her was easier than examining what you were doing." "You're right," Matthew whispered. "You're absolutely right. And your silence, Matthew, your silence in the face of their cruelty was its own form of betrayal. Every time they mocked me and you said nothing, you told them I didn't matter enough to defend. You told me I wasn't worth choosing. I thought I was keeping the peace." "You were preserving your comfort," Simone corrected. "Defending me would have meant confronting your family, acknowledging their behavior was wrong, risking their disapproval. So you chose the path of least resistance. You let them abuse me so you didn't have to face conflict." Matthew covered his face with his hands. "God, that's exactly what I did. Yes, and it worked because I was trying to be the good wife, the understanding one, the one who didn't make waves. I made myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared." She sat down again, looking at him directly. "But here's what you didn't understand, Matthew. I was never powerless. I was never actually dependent on you. I chose to build a life with you. I chose to trust you. I chose to try to make it work despite your family's hostility. Simone, I had power the entire time. Legal authority, financial protection. I could have stopped this months ago. But I didn't because I loved you. Because I believed the man I married was still in there somewhere. Because I hoped you'd choose me eventually. I do choose you," Matthew said desperately. "I'm choosing you now. Are you? Or are you choosing not to lose your access to accounts?" Simone's voice was gentle but unsparing. "Because there's a difference. I need to know if you understand what you did wrong, or if you just understand that there are consequences now." Matthew was silent for a long moment. Then both. "I understand both. But Simone, I swear to you, these last few hours, watching my family beg, watching you stand there with power I didn't know you had, it broke something open in me." "What did it break?" "The illusion that I was the reasonable one, the provider, the one holding everything together." He looked at her fully. "I've been telling myself for months that you were the problem. Too sensitive, too demanding, too ungrateful. But tonight I saw the truth. Which is that I was the problem. I took someone strong and tried to make her weak because weak was easier to manage. I took someone capable and tried to make her dependent because dependent meant I was needed." His voice broke. "I didn't want a partner. I wanted someone who needed me. And when you stopped needing me, I punished you for it." Simone felt tears prick her eyes. It was the first time he'd articulated it clearly. "The medication," Matthew continued. $45. I refused because you asked for it. Because asking meant you had needs I wasn't anticipating. Because it reminded me you were a separate person with separate needs, not just an extension of me. Yes, Simone said softly. That's sick. That's actually sick. Matthew's hands were shaking. I denied you medical care because it threatened my sense of control. What kind of person does that? Someone who was taught that control equals love. That's not love. He couldn't finish. They sat in the weight of that realization. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Simone said finally. I don't know if this marriage is salvageable, but I know I can't go back to how things were. I don't want to go back, Matthew said. I want to start over. Completely. As actual partners. Partners means equals, Matthew. It means my voice carries the same weight as yours. It means you stand beside me, even when it costs you your family's approval. It means financial transparency and mutual respect and never, ever making me beg for basic needs. Yes, all of that. Whatever it takes. It means therapy. Real therapy. Not just going through the motions until I calm down. Actually examining how you think about power and control and marriage. I'll go. I'll do the work. I promise. Simone studied his face. Saw genuine anguish there. Genuine desire to change. But she'd learned tonight that desire wasn't enough. Action was what mattered. Here's what happens now, she said. Tomorrow, you open every account we have. You give me full access to everything. You explain every investment, every expense, every financial decision you've made without me. Complete transparency. Done. Next week, we start couples therapy. And you start individual therapy. Non-negotiable. Okay. Your family apologizes. Real apologies. Written once. And they don't get access to us, to our home, our time, our lives, until I'm ready. That might be weeks. It might be months. You don't pressure me about it. Matthew's face tightened, but he nodded. I understand. And Matthew? If you ever choose their approval over my dignity again, if you ever let them mock me, control me, or treat me as less than, I'm done. No second chances. No explanations. I walk. I understand, he said quietly. And Simone? I will spend the rest of my life proving I understand. If you'll let me. She didn't answer immediately. Just looked at this man she'd married, who'd spent 7 months slowly erasing her, who'd finally been forced to see what he'd been doing. I don't need you to protect me, she said finally. I never did. I needed you to stand beside me, to value me enough to risk comfort for my dignity. That's what partners do. I know that now. Do you? Because knowing it intellectually and living it are different things. Then I'll learn to live it. I'll prove it. Simone stood. Maybe. We'll see. But Matthew? I meant what I said tonight. I have power. I've always had it. And if you ever forget that again, I'll use it. Not to hurt you. Just to protect myself. I won't forget, Matthew said. I swear to God, I won't forget. She walked toward the stairs, exhausted suddenly by the weight of the evening. Are we going to be okay? Matthew asked, his voice small. Simone paused. I don't know yet. But we're going to find out. With honesty this time. With respect. With you actually standing beside me instead of in front of me or behind your family. She climbed the stairs, leaving Matthew sitting alone on the couch. Finally, beginning to understand the magnitude of what he'd almost lost. And what he'd have to do to earn it back. 3 months later, Simone stood in the kitchen of their home, preparing coffee on a Saturday morning that felt almost normal. Almost. The house was different now. The furniture was the same, the layout unchanged, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Like the same room rebuilt with different foundations. Matthew came downstairs, dressed for his therapy appointment. Individual therapy, the second session of the week. He'd been going twice weekly since Christmas, working through what his therapist called learned patterns of control and the intersection of racial assumptions with marital dynamics. Coffee? Simone asked. Please. She poured him a cup. He thanked her. Small moment, simple exchange. But different than before because now it was automatic rather than calculated. She didn't weigh whether he'd earned coffee. He didn't expect it as service owed. They sat together at the kitchen table. Beside each other now, not across. Mom called again, Matthew said carefully. Asking about Easter dinner. What did you tell her? That I'd discuss it with you. That it was your decision. Simone sipped her coffee, considering. Patricia had written the apology Simone demanded. 3 pages, single-spaced, naming every microaggression, every cruel comment, every moment of dismissal. It had been genuine, or as genuine as Patricia was capable of. Robert's had been shorter but sincere. Claire's had been tear-stained. They'd followed through on the conditions. Financial transparency was complete. Simone now had access to everything and understood exactly how the Carter family finances worked. The accounts had been unfrozen after 2 weeks, but restructured. Simone was primary on everything. Matthew had access, but not control. The couple's therapy was progressing. Slowly, with setbacks and breakthroughs in equal measure. I don't know yet, Simone said honestly. I'm not ready to sit at their table again. That's fair. Matthew didn't push. Didn't suggest she should get over it, or that family was important, or that his parents had learned their lesson. That was growth. Maybe we host, Simone suggested. Here. Our house. Our terms. They come to us. Matthew's face showed surprise, then consideration. You'd be comfortable with that? More comfortable than being in their space. This is our territory. I'm not trapped here. If they start sliding back into old patterns, I can ask them to leave. Okay, that makes sense. He paused. Should I tell them the conditions? I'll tell them, Simone said. I'll call your mother this week. Another shift. Simone handling the family dynamics directly rather than through Matthew as intermediary. Taking her own authority rather than asking him to wield it for her. Matthew's phone buzzed. That's my reminder. Therapy in 45 minutes. How's it going? The individual sessions. He considered the question seriously. Hard. Really hard. My therapist keeps asking me to examine assumptions I didn't know I had. About power. About race. About what being a husband means. He met her eyes. I'm discovering I'm more like my father than I wanted to believe. Are you changing it? Trying. Some days I catch myself mid-thought and realize I'm about to do the thing I'm trying not to do. Other days I don't catch it until after. That's still progress. Is it enough? Simone reached across and took his hand. First time she'd initiated touch in weeks. It's enough for today? Ask me again tomorrow. He squeezed her hand gently, then released it. Didn't cling. Didn't try to turn the gesture into more than it was. That was growth too. After he left for therapy, Simone returned to her laptop. The graphic design business she'd restarted was growing. 3 clients now, with 2 more in negotiation. The work was hers. The income was hers. The identity was hers. She'd learned something crucial these past 3 months. She didn't need Matthew's money. She'd never needed it. What she needed was partnership. Respect. The basic dignity of being treated as an equal. With or without him, she'd survive. Thrive, even. That knowledge changed everything. It meant she was staying in this marriage by choice, not by necessity. Every day she chose to work on it was a gift, not an obligation. And if Matthew ever forgot that, if he ever slid back into control disguised as care, she'd leave. Not with drama, not with destruction, just with the quiet certainty that some things weren't negotiable. Her phone rang. Tasha. Hey girl, her best friend said. How are you? Good, actually. Really good. Yeah. Tasha sounded skeptical. Because Christmas was. I know. It was a lot. But Tasha, things.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Subscribe, like, and click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.